Okay, so we're going through Deuteronomy this week and next week. And then we have worked our way through the first 5 books of the Bible. And so that'll be exciting. Have we been doing this all school year? Yes? I thought there was some series at the beginning. No, it's been since after winter break. It's been 2019. So, yeah, we got through 5 books of the Bible pretty quickly, but we skipped pretty much all of Leviticus for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to continue with that. Tonight's lesson is called Not by Righteousness, and this lesson is not talking about salvation. It's talking about what God accomplishes through us, and it's not by our righteousness. So a little bit of context. As a reminder, I always get the hiccups right before my lessons. Give me a second.
Water. Drink the water.
Going back.
No, if he does that, it's receiving the right.
You're out in the riddle.
I think it's because I get excited and I just take in too much air. That's what Laura said. Okay, so it's some context, David. Some context. That's your cue. Some context. This is Moses' last words to the Israelites. He's giving a summary of the journey that has happened so far. And it's kind of interesting because the other books of the Bible, they just kind of describe what happened. Well, now this is like Moses describing what happened, except he adds his own little 2 cents in there. He adds his own little lessons in there and stuff. And so this is right during a span of time when the generation that was released from Egypt was dying off, and this new generation is coming to be. And so this whole book is over the span of a few months, and it's his final words to the Israelites. I will now pray. So I'm going to be transparent with you guys, as I always am. And I've preached this before on a Sunday morning. But I have always had a hard time being in this youth leader position because of my heart's natural tendency to kind of seek the glory for myself, if that makes any sense. Joel and I were talking the other night. He was here a little bit later, and we were talking about old youth group days, and we were talking about how dramatically my teaching has gotten better. And I was telling him, there was just this one phase when I was listening to a lot of Francis Chan sermons and stuff, and it really changed a lot for me. But as I was thinking about it more, the thing that really, I think, caused my teaching to just elevate was when I was listening to Francis Chan, something that really impacted me was his heart to not be at the center of attention. That he was this really a mega church pastor. He was this guy being asked to go preach at all of these huge events and writing books and all this stuff. And through the entire time, he was trying to step out of the limelight. It was like, it's not about me, it's about him. If I know I have the ability to speak. If I really wanted to, I could totally just suck up the money, but that's not what I want. And as Francis Chan was going through this, message after message, I looked at myself and my intentions for teaching lessons. And I saw myself teaching about the goodness of God while meditating on the goodness of Paul. It was like I was pushing for you guys, you should pray, you should do this, you should do this. And it was supposed to be about God, but the whole time my heart was focused on me. Do you see how twisted that is? It was my job as the youth volunteer to try and encourage you guys to enter into a relationship with God, to be moved by His goodness, and all that I could focus on was myself. Oh, that was a really good line. Oh, that was a really good prayer. Oh, that was good counsel. Oh, and I was so focused on my own righteousness. Now, you guys, you don't have to teach a youth group to have this struggle, to be to be self-righteous, to glorify yourself. It can come in many different ways. It can come in worship. If you're worshiping God and you're impressed with your voice, or if you're even impressed with your heart, oh man, my heart is so focused on God, this is great, and you start meditating on yourself. I have had times where I'm nearly fantasizing about like changing people's lives, you know? That's not how it's supposed to be. It can come in theology, knowing all the theology, having all the right answers, being able to talk about the complexities of it. Oh, I know so much about God. I read my Bible so much. Really, honestly, if you're following God as the Bible tells you to, it'll probably be some sort of temptation along the way. And so if you're not struggling with this whole self-righteousness thing, then either one, you're not following the Bible like you should. Two, you're just not aware that you are being self-righteous. Or three, you're aware that you're being self-righteous and you're already struggling through it. Because it's just kind of a natural thing. And it's crazy because you look at Jesus, and the people that he was the most furious with were the religious leaders who were self-righteous, who presented their righteousness before people, who prayed out in public in order to be looked at as great. And I know that I war with that in myself, and you should be warring with that too. Next slide. So now we're in Deuteronomy. And what we have here is Moses is talking to the Israelites, and he's saying, after these 40 years, you're going to be going into the promised land. You are going to be going into the promised land. It's this incredible blessing, but his reminder to them is what my reminder tonight is to you. He says, but be assured today that the Lord your God is the one who goes across ahead of you like a devouring fire. He will destroy them. He will subdue them before you, and you will drive them out and annihilate them quickly as the Lord has promised you. Now this is important because he says twice, he will, and then he says you will, because it's a reminder that you are the medium. You are the one that God is using to impact lives. That's definitely the case, but then the very next line, he goes right back to it. So he says, he will destroy them, he will subdue them, you will annihilate them, and then he says, the Lord your God has driven them out before you. The whole point is, look, you're going to be the one going into the promised land, you're going to be the one destroying them, but no, it is he who will destroy them. It's he that will subdue them. He will drive them out before you. And then he just says straight up, do not say to yourself, the Lord has brought me here to take possession of the land because of my righteousness. No. It is on account of the wickedness of these nations that the Lord is going to drive them out. He keeps saying it. He says that 3 times. The Lord your God will drive them out. Hermeneutics, which is Bible interpretation. That's what hermeneutics means. Hermeneutics 101. If you're looking for the point of a passage, look for repetition. If there's repetition, there's of a phrase or of a word, there's a good chance that that's important to that specific passage. And he repeats 3 times, the Lord your God has driven them out. The Lord your God has driven them out. And then he repeats twice, not because of your righteousness. Not because of your righteousness. And then at the end, he even goes on to say, look, you're stick-necked people. You're stubborn. Remember this and never forget how you aroused the anger of the Lord your God in the wilderness. From the day you left Egypt until the day you arrived here, you have been rebellious against the Lord. And so he goes on. He's saying, look, God's going to go in and you'll wipe out these people. You need to remember, it's God that's doing it. It's not you. It's not by your righteousness. And then he goes on to remind them and be like, how could it be your righteousness? You guys have been stubborn and disobedient the whole time. Remember when we were going through Numbers? I told story after story of how The Israelites were just disobedient. They wanted to do things their own way. So it wasn't by their righteousness. So wrapping this around back to us, it's easy to kind of point to the Israelites as the bad example, but we do the exact same thing. Because, I mean, when I was teaching lessons, and I was sitting there going, oh, that was such a good line. Oh, that was so spiritual. Oh, I'm going to change these kids' lives. Isn't that so messed up? I was still committing major sins. How could I possibly be thinking that I was the one accomplishing these great spiritual works in anybody? I was changing people's lives when my life wasn't even changed myself. And so you need to remember, if God accomplishes something through you, it is God who is accomplishing it through you. Like even right now, me teaching this lesson, if there is any good in this message, if you are getting anything out of it, if there is anything spiritually getting accomplished in your heart, it is because God is the one who is doing it. I am a human being. Without Him, I'm not eternal. So how could just flesh and blood, something that isn't eternal, cause eternal change? I don't possess that power. Only God possesses that power. If there is something good getting accomplished in you, it's because God is choosing to accomplish it in you. It is He that is doing the good work. I am literally just the mouth. Hopefully, if I'm doing this right, I am just the mouth that He's using to present this to you. But here's the beauty of this, of the passage. Even though I'm flawed, I still have sins that I struggle with. Even though, as I teach this lesson right now, my own heart is warring to be like, oh yeah, that was a good line, Paul. I mean, like, I'm going through that, like, every single lesson. Even though I'm flawed and I'm constantly seeking the glory for myself, God chooses to bless me when He's the one doing the work. Look at this example. Look at the example of Deuteronomy. What does He say? You guys have been disobedient from the start. It's not by your righteousness. God is the one who's doing it. It's by His righteousness. It's by His righteousness. It's by His righteousness. It's not by your righteousness. It's not by your righteousness. He says the only reason you're doing it, He's doing it, is because He promised it from the start. And so it's very clear we have nothing to do with it, except we are the instrument that He's choosing to use. But then at the same time, what do the Israelites get out of it? They get the promised land. They get blessing. They get land. They get a land flowing with milk and honey. They get protection as they go to war. They are incredibly blessed, even though Moses knows their hearts are in a place where they want to seek the glory for themselves. Moses knows they've been stubborn the entire time and have been continually sinning. So even though God is the one who's entirely doing the work, He's doing everything to cause change, just because I have the lips to try my best to be obedient to what He has, He blesses you for it. How good of a God is that? I mean, like, let's just try and do an illustration. Let's say that there's a construction worker, and he has a power drill, and the power drill is a piece of crud, and it keeps wanting to just like go at stupid angles, and it keeps running out of battery. And then at the end of the day, he's just like, man, I love this power drill. I'm going to give it a nice, good charge. I mean, that's like kind of like what it is. We're the power drill. We're the ones who do things wrong. And if anything gets accomplished, it's just because He's the one doing it. And then at the end of the day, He blesses us for it. Because He loves us and because He cares for us. And so, David, go ahead and go next slide. This is the one thing that I want you to remember. Hold on to this, if nothing else. Does anybody remember what I wanted you to remember last week? She wasn't here. You weren't here. Gabe was here. Gabe and Joel. It's between Gabe and Joel. Jacob, you weren't here, right? No, okay. Yeah, you had jujitsu, right? And you were chopping heads off with your bare hands. The title of the lesson was Loving God.
Oh yeah, it's if you have God's rules, but not like a relationship, not His love, and life is miserable.
Yeah, very good, Joel. Yeah. Okay, so this is the one for tonight. The warring of intentions only becomes easier with deeper revelation of who He is. I'm going to repeat it. The warring of intentions only becomes easier with the deeper revelation of who He is. Okay, so I made the point that we all kind of will struggle with self-righteousness. If we're living according to the Word, that will be a natural temptation to seek the glory for ourselves. Now, when I became aware of my own intentions, I just tried to grit my teeth and try and no, it's not going to be about me. It's not going to be, which is probably good to have a little bit of that. But if that's the only thing that you're doing to fight that sin, it's going to be a losing battle. The warring of intentions only becomes easier with deeper revelation of who He is. As I've gone on through the years, the only way that I've been able to effectively teach lessons without my own sinful heart getting in the way of it has been getting excited about who He is. Because if you see how great He is, if you see how good He is, how wonderful He is, then your heart, whether it's in theology, whether it's in worship, whether it's teaching a lesson, it's just naturally excited about how great He is. The perspective is, He is incredible, and I just want you to know about it. But if God isn't that incredible to you, then, your heart is naturally going to seek to worship something, and if it's not doing it worshipfully to Him, it'll probably do it worshipfully to yourself. So the answer, again, always to the sin struggle, is a deeper revelation of who He is. But especially on the sin of your motivations, of your intentions, because your heart is so sneaky. You can be doing the most righteous deed, but you can still be doing it sinfully because your heart is in the wrong place. You're supposed to be doing it out of an act of worship to who He is. And so, if your perspective of Him is small, it's going to be pretty hard to worship something small. So one last time, the warring of intentions only becomes easier with deeper revelation of who He is. And now, I'm going to pray, and we're going to jump into our small groups.